fans.
Hey there, film fans. I'm Jeff.
I'm Dave.
And I'm John, and welcome back to The Love of Cinema, a pod in which we'll challenge one another to discuss movies both new and old with a strictly positive critical eye.
That's right. And to avoid any lazy negativity, we're going to go ahead and make this a drinking game.
A what?
Yay!
We're making this a drinking game. So anytime we
Oh.
say something negative or stupid about a film, it is totally fine. It's happened before. It will happen again. But we will be called out for it. You will hear this lovely sound, which means we are drinking. And we hope you at home are going to drink along with us. Let's get on with the show.
So pour yourselves a glass, join us, and give it up for the films we love, and perhaps a film that needs some love this week.
Maybe. We're talking about three fantastic films from the film year 1960, which has a number of memorable films that many of you would recognize some of the titles. But first, let's send it over to John for some shout-outs.
All right, as always, want to give it up for our beer sponsor, Carlos Barroso. You can follow him on Instagram. The handle is cbarroso bar 2019. That's CBARROZOBAR 2019. And as always, the music you hear on this episode and every episode is provided by the artist Dasein. That's Dasein, Dasein. You can find all the music available for free downloads at soundcloud.com/Dasein-artist. All right, guys, 19
He does that live every week, too. He doesn't pre-record
That's
that.
great. Yeah, and this time you just flowed right into the 1960s section. But we're going to punt on it for a little bit longer because we should do it around the horn. I don't think that's exactly what I meant. I think we should.
Sounds hot. That's fucking...
We should go around the horn with a quick what you've been watching and maybe any news stories you want to share. Dave, what you've been watching?
Oh, I finished up Umbrella Academy this week.
Loving it?
Good, yeah, loving it. Good finish. Can't wait for season 3.
Another cliffhanger ending?
Oh, it's weird because it feels like it wraps up an episode early, and then you get to the ending, and there's this big reveal, and it's like, oh shit, the next season's going to be very interesting. I've been watching The Outsider, the adaptation of the Stephen King story.
Yeah, I saw that.
You're in the middle of it?
I'm in the middle of it, yeah. I'm about, I would say, halfway through the first season. And I've been watching the documentary on Netflix about the introduction of gaming, or the invention of gaming, High Score. And I'd recommend anyone who's even remotely interested in gaming watch this. It's hilarious, it's well done, and quite informative.
Whoa.
Starts from like the Genesis, like chronologically, the history of gaming and everything? Or is
Dude,
it kinda...
Genesis is episode 5.
I meant like... Well, Sega Genesis, shout out there.
Shout out to Sega.
God, I haven't thought about that in years. Oh my God. Cool, dude. Nice. Informative.
John?
Cool.
I took immediately on Sunday night, I believe, I took your recommendation. I watched The Social Dilemma, and that was definitely worth watching. That is something everybody should check out, I think. Whenever you're living in these crazy times and you feel like there's no way to understand stuff, it made me remember, I know we mentioned it last week, The Great Hack, but it kind of gave me that same feeling that like, okay, there is something, or there are some things that you can understand a little bit better that might give you some context for why it feels so fucking out of control right now. And this is one of those things. So I recommend everybody check it out. It's on Netflix, feature-length documentary. I also watched, kept going with the docs, and I watched the entire Immigration Nation series that's on Netflix as well. 6-part documentary series. It's about the state of the country's situation with immigration. Kind of touches a little bit on the history, but it's mostly these past, 4 to 6, 8 years kind of dealing with it and kind of giving you context for what's happening right now. Very emotional, very intense, but again, very informative. I definitely recommend if you don't mind feeling very sad for a few days, I think it would be worth your time to check that out. And then, then I watched these. How about you?
Awesome. I left this podcast on Sunday night and I started Seven Samurai because it is the inspiration for one of these films. And I did not make it through the 3 hours and 40 minutes, which I've already seen. I've already seen, but I just wanted to live in that moment for a little bit. And God damn it, it's so good. And it happens so fast. Those guys come in and they're like, ha,
so much weather.
You don't have any food, so we'll come back in a few months. I hope you have food then. Bye. And that's it. That is all the exposition. Anyway, but I tried
screaming at each other.
I don't know why. I'm a moody TV watcher, so I tried starting Away with Hilary Swank, the space dramedy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very clearly a Netflix international play. It is about an international space team that Hilary Swank is going to lead on the first manned mission to Mars, or I guess we should say humaned mission to Mars, since there are multiple ladies. They take a pit stop on the moon on the way to Mars, which is fun. She's leaving her family behind for years. You would think all the context is there, and it truly the dialogue, right? I'm never gonna act for these people ever again after this pandemic. It is the worst piece of fucking shit dialogue writing I've ever heard in a television series. I mean, I'm never gonna act, so I'm not really worried about that. I would love to. Certainly not after this podcast. I mean, the dialogue, it is atrocious. It is like, you know those episodes of Grey's Anatomy where they're like, oh crap, we forgot about these two doctors in this episode, so let's just give them some weird like backstory. It is, I mean, I don't know if it's because of the international appeal. It is not smart. I don't know how they put so much money into it. Clearly, they knew what they were doing. They have smart people that are successful. These writers are successful. I don't know why they can't write human interactions that are remotely realistic. It is just.
Is it supposed to? Was it like supposed to feel like Grey's, like melodrama, soapy? Is it supposed to feel like that, and you just don't like that?
Like when someone asks a question and they immediately just start a monologue. Do you know? 15 years ago when I first looked at you, you know, like those kinds of things, and it's like, oh my god.
I once knew a girl who lived on Jefferson Street, but that was a long time ago.
I don't want to shit on Away anymore, but I was really. It's too bad because Hilary Swank is awesome. I don't know how she knows how to make this dialogue work, but she's great.
Dude.
Josh Charles, maybe he caught up by the next episode. What I would say, I watched 5 episodes of Broadchurch Friday night. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yes. That news happened, and I was just like, I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to. I just was like angry, and I was like, I need to be away from. I can't. So we just sat down and we pushed play on Broadchurch first season, and we just watched 5 episodes in a row. I love Olivia Colman, obviously David Tennant. It's so good.
So good.
So yeah, that's what I've been watching. Okay, Emmy news. That's happening right now. We are recording this on Sunday, September 20th. It is currently 7:17 p.m. So these things haven't even started yet. So anybody want to play Nostradamus? Anybody want to give a shot? Anybody have anything? Anybody care at all about the Emmys here?
I mean, yeah, no, not really.
All you need to know is Game of Thrones won Best Drama for season 8. So clearly the Emmys have lost almost all.
That's for the Emmys.
No, seriously. So for me, I'm way more interested in the actors and the performers. So I'm liking Watchmen. I would love Regina King, but also Cate Blanchett and Mrs. America. That's a nice category.
I think Watchmen and Mrs. America are going to be the two to watch there.
That'll be fun for the limited series. I like Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who's awesome. I hope he wins supporting actor in a limited series. For the comedies, I did love Schitt's Creek, so I'm rooting for both the Levies, although I believe Eugene is not going to win. I'm feeling like a Rami or even a Ted Danson, but I would love Catherine O'Hara or either Levies to win. Issa Rae could get some love, finally. So that would be really interesting. And then the drama category, it's all about Succession and Ozark this year. They're great. Ozark got a little bit of love last year, so I almost wish it didn't, so that this year it could just be like a sweep. There's a little bit of call for Better Call Saul too, but I don't know. I want Meryl Streep to win. I think she gave the performance of the year in Big Little Lies, a show that was not very good otherwise. And maybe Brian Cox, because he's awesome and he's Brian Cox. And then last thing is I want Trevor Noah to win. John Oliver would be happy to pass the torch, and Stephen Colbert has enough Emmys. Let's get Trevor Noah some love for doing some good work in the pandemic.
Trevor's been doing some good work.
I think so too.
Yeah, I've been enjoying
and his whole team. His writers are still contributing, even though you don't see them. So that's it for the Emmys. We'll see if I was right about any of these, but that's what I'm hoping for. Anything else you guys want to say before we get into it?
I think we can get into it.
Let's fucking do it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys, 1960. So last week, I thought no movies came out in 1960 that anybody should talk about. And boy, was I wrong. Highest grossing picture of 1959 was Ben-Hur, which actually bled into 1960 a little bit. It was Ben-Hur, I think, was still the number one international film in 1960 because of how releases took forever back then. But anybody, guys, number one at the box office, 1960?
Psycho.
No, number 2.
Oh, shit.
This is Spartacus. Spartacus, number 1.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah.
Psycho, number 2. Let's see. After that, you have Exodus, Swiss Family Robinson. I think I've seen that on like some weird channels in the middle of the day. Number 5. This was our runner-up for our redemption film. The John Wayne directed classic, probably racist film, The Alamo, comes in at number 5 on the box office charts, 1960. Butterfield 8 got some acting Oscars.
Where's
The Apartment
Time
comes
Machine?
in. Apartment's
I
at
could have
number
seen
8.
that doing pretty well.
Nope, not at the box
Wow.
office. Ocean's
Nope.
11. Ocean's 11, the original, 1960. That's number 9. From the Terrace, you get a little bit of award buzz. You would hear a lot of familiar names. For instance, Burt Lancaster wins an Oscar for Best Actor. He beats Jack Lemmon, Laurence Olivier, and Spencer Tracy. So a lot of big names acting this year. Peter Falk nominated for a supporting acting Oscar. So another familiar name there. And then you also have Liz Taylor wins an Oscar. Shirley Jones win an Oscar. So a lot of familiar names. Other movies you might know: Inherit the Wind. That's where you get your Spencer Tracy nod. You got Can, Bells Are Ringing, and then a little movie that maybe wasn't too popular in 1960, but we know now is Little Shop of Horrors with Jack Nicholson in a very, very small featured role. Came out in 1960, directed by somebody that John likes very well, Mr. Roger Corman. But we are going to be discussing 3 films. We're going to be discussing.
Also wanted to mention.
Oh, sorry. Damn it!
Also,
I forgot you could talk.
3 really famous foreign films came out that year: Godard's Breathless, Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, and Antonioni's La Ventura. Those are 3 just incredibly famous foreign art house films, and those are definitely worth checking out as well. But let's do it.
What was 13 Ghosts nominated for?
Oh my God, Dave, get out of here! Get the fuck out of here!
They didn't have the Razzies then?
They did not have the Razzies. No.
Yeah. The reason the Razzies were invented.
Maybe best cameo performance. I feel like it would have won an MTV Movie Award for that cameo performance. That we'll get to in a little bit.
What the fuck was that?
All right, we're gonna talk about 3 films.
It's my problem. I'll work through it.
We definitely wanted to talk about The Magnificent Seven, based on Seven Samurai. They decided to take the Japanese hit film by Kurosawa, Seven Samurai, and put it on horseback and take it to Mexico. So
they left the music in though.
Yeah, the music. Yeah, that's right. We have some Japanese flutes in there. No.
I really love that they actually credit Seven Samurai in the opening credits.
Oh, really?
That's really classy. I like that.
I mean,
that is cool.
It's The Magnificent Seven. Like it's right there in the title. Very,
I know, but you
obvious,
get films like Quarantine that was a rip off of the Spanish film Wreck. And they keep that real quiet.
I think they kind of like the camp a little bit, and just at least the pitch. Anyway, so we're going to start with Magnificent Seven. Then we're going to be talking about Billy Wilder's The Apartment, starring Jack Lemmon and a very young Shirley MacLaine, and a very, very, very good. What are you laughing at? That she's young or what? The burp.
Your burp.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
The Apartment, fantastic film.
It's the first time I've seen young Shirley MacLaine acting.
Same. She's good. I forgot how much how successful she was before her brother became more successful later in the 60s. We'll get to that. So The Apartment was the Best Picture winner at the Oscars, so we're going to talk about that second. And then finally, we're going to talk about 13 Ghosts, which was a horror film that year. The director actually the year before had a pretty good hit in what the hell is that movie called? They do this all the time. Whatever, it'll come to me in our segment. Tune in for that later. The House on Haunted Hill, 1959 was the year before, and they used to put like skeletons in the theater, and it became like a big Halloween-y gag movie. So this is his follow-up to that. Also, it's a horror comedy. 13 Ghosts. Stick around for that. Let us get into Magnificent Seven. Huh? Anybody? Without further ado, here we go. So I'll give you the IMDb, the brief summary here, which we've already kind of told a little bit, is 7 gunfighters are hired by a Mexican peasants to liberate their village from oppressive bandits. So these
sounds like that should be a good 90 minutes, but what's the runtime on this?
Right. So here's the more expansive storyline. A bandit terrorizes a small Mexican farming village each year. Several of the village elders send 3 of the farmers into the United States, Texas specifically, to search for gunmen to defend them. They end up with 7, each of whom comes for a different reason. They must prepare the town to repulse an army of 30 bandits who will arrive wanting food. That's the pitch. Anybody want to take it from there?
Was this everybody's first time seeing this?
Yeah.
I had seen this as a child, but I didn't remember a lot of stuff from it.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather was a massive, massive fan of the westerns.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I do
if,
love
if,
westerns.
yeah, if it had horses and cowboys, he read books, he saw the movies. Yeah, he loved it.
Would you guys both say you're Western fans? I know, John, you had like a binge one time where you watched all the big Westerns. Dave, would you consider yourself a big Western fan as well?
Not so much. No.
Yeah, okay.
For me too. It depends on who's making it, who's in it. I think it is a strictly American thing. Like I think it's one of our things that we have claim to. So when it's done really well, I think it can be amazing. Even though a handful of my favorite westerns are made in Italy, but yeah, I think it can be great. But I don't know. It's not quite as much of a blanket statement as it is for like noir or something like that for me, where I probably can sit down and watch most of those movies. How about you? I don't feel like I've ever heard you really talk about westerns.
Look, I'm just pissed because I thought this was a bottle opener that I brought, and it's actually a peeler.
It's a peeler. Yeah, I was wondering why. I was wondering why you had a fucking vegetable peeler in your
trying to
camera
open
shot.
my beer.
And Jeff just tried to open his beer with a vegetable peeler. Jeff,
I can't drink. I can't open my beer. Fuck. Damn it!
Oh
I'm gonna
my
I'm
God.
gonna ask you a question and then disappear for 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. I brought a can. Okay, great. On the break, I'll get my thing. Awesome. I do love westerns, but I did not give myself I haven't given myself the pleasure of watching all of the great ones. I saw Once Upon a Time in America with you. I don't think I've ever seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I've seen the original True Grit. I've seen The Searchers, but I still wouldn't. I'm not an expert on it the way that you guys are. But I do feel like this one it's not like the Western to watch if you love Westerns, unless you just sort of like want to tiptoe your way in. Would you kind of agree with that?
I mean, this is not by any chance by any means a standard Western. This has so much extra layer to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't really follow I don't like using the word tropes, but the rules of a typical Western. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this was the whole time I was watching this, I was a little like, okay, so I guess this was, even though there was a lot of shooting, I guess they were trying to aim this at they were trying to capture like the virtue of what those samurais had in Kurosawa's. But, there's so much, I think one reason I like this movie. I think it's good. And I understand why some people love this movie. I love the ensemble is tons of fun. John Sturges got some of this gang together a few years later and made The Great Escape. And I love that movie as well. So there's an energy to this kind of ensemble thing that's fun. But one thing that didn't quite work for me in this and I am a huge Kurosawa fan. So I wasn't judging this the whole time. I was excited to see what they were going to do with it. One thing I think just fundamentally that didn't quite cross the finish line for me the entire time was that samurais have an oath of virtue. And especially at the time he made that, it was at a time in Japan's history where they were kind of being cast out. So there was this group of people who still had these principles and this philosophy, and they were upholding them in a freelance form, if you will, because the emperor was no longer calling them to his aid all the time. I don't know if I bought 7 gunslingers just doing the right thing. It was fun, and I wanted to be on board with it because it had a lot of heart. There were a lot of moments where they were trying to make these guys have their own little scenes.
I mean, at least one of them is only there so he can find the gold that he thinks they've got in the hills.
Right, but even he comes back, and tries to help out. And I don't get me wrong, I did not dislike that. I appreciated it. It just felt a little bit like maybe a little bit too clean. Like I feel like if some of them or all of them, except for Yul Brynner, were a little bit more conflicted, I think it would have been a more interesting movie. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that?
I think I mean, yeah, it definitely would have changed up the movie a lot. I think what they had worked mainly because everybody went on some form of journey. Like there was one guy who was not with a family, and he gets stationed with the kids all the time. He wasn't interested in a family and that sort of thing. You get the 2 main guys who are just really not interested in this life anymore and really want to settle down, and it's their journey towards realizing that, plus other conflicts. Everyone has a little journey. They weren't necessarily at each other's throats because of the journey, but I think the camaraderie in this is what makes it stand out a little bit.
Absolutely, and that definitely works. Their chemistry is wonderful. All these guys are fucking fantastic together.
And yet, apparently,
I had never seen Yul Brynner in anything else.
Yul Brynner and what's his name? The other main guy.
Steve.
Yeah, Steve McQueen. Sorry, couldn't stand each other.
In real life?
They had beef for years after this film because Steve McQueen kept like stealing the background of shots on Yul Brynner.
Oh, because he's just bringing that behavior in there. It's just so interesting.
Yeah.
I was noticing their acting. I couldn't help but just think about how all these guys were trained. Yul Brynner is a heavy Chekhov guy, and that's a very specific style of acting. Not to go too deep dive here, but it was interesting watching. You don't see many people who have that kind of training. I liked what he did. I thought it was very interesting. But I'm glad you said that because I was noticing Bronson and McQueen in the background a lot. They were just doing something.
Everybody started doing it.
We're going to get into this with The Apartment heavy, but we can talk about it right now. Can I introduce it? This is like a bridge of time with acting technique, and it was affecting the way movies were being made. And I think you could kind of see that even in some of this stuff, which I feel like was kind of like family fantasy Western style.
Also, this movie still had a dialogue director, and I had to look up what that was.
What is that? Yeah, tell me, what is that?
It's during the transition from silent films to talkies, a dialogue director was hired to coach the performers how to deliver their lines for camera, because some of these guys didn't have a voice for like performing on camera because it'd been silent films up until this point, and some of them had like really bad, annoying voices. They make jokes about it in like animated shows like Family Guy and Simpsons a lot, like where the guys progressed from like silent talkies and they just couldn't cut it because of their voice.
The Family Guy one's really good. Yeah, the guy's voice is like really high pitched.
It's Bobcat Goldthwait doing that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Bobcat. Yeah. It's such a joke. Not the first Bobcat joke for Family Guy. So you know what? So what I love too is obviously John and I have acting backgrounds. Dave has literally done every single technical job on a film, and he has acted in many films too. But to John's point about the acting, first of all, let's give a shout out to the cast. Just so obviously, there was a remake recently, by the way, with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt. We would not recommend that film. No disrespect to the actors, but listen to this cast. So you have Yul Brynner in the lead. You have Eli Wallach, who is considered to be one of the better character actors of the time. You have Steve McQueen, who was a huge star and very, he was an up-and-comer still at that point, but very attractive. He's very well known. Horst Buchholz was also another very famous, internationally known character actor. Charles Bronson, who was I didn't know how ripped he was. He was like big compared to everybody in this, but he was a star of a bunch of Westerns too. Robert Vaughn, who we'll later see in Bullet. You have James Coburn. You have a couple, very recognizable people at the time. So the cast is really good, but this is a weird anecdote to pull on, but when Jerry Bruckheimer and Gore Verbinski were casting Pirates of the Caribbean, they thought, you know what we should do? We need to cast somebody that would be unexpected, that you wouldn't think would be a pirate, because if we play into the pirate trope, it's just gonna be another stupid, childish movie. Let's get somebody completely out of the box, so that way it'll really feel like this pirate isn't even in the pirate community anymore. And so they cast Johnny Depp. I feel like Yul Brynner is not exactly the same thing as that, but a little background on Yul Brynner. Is a huge theater actor, as John sort of alluded to. He didn't have a ton of credits, and then all of a sudden in films, and then in 1956, 4 years before our current films take place, he has The King and I, which won an Oscar for Best Actor, The 10 Commandments, where he plays Ramses, and Anastasia, where he plays the general. So the villain in 2 of the movies, and the
Westworld was in there somewhere as well, wasn't it?
Not on. I'm looking at IMDb and I do not see Westworld on here.
Okay.
But anyway, so those 3 movies come out in 1956, and all of a sudden,
that's 70s, yeah.
And with the Oscar, he is the talk of the town. So then in 1958, all of a sudden, all these movies come his way. And I would say if you've ever seen The 10 Commandments or Anastasia or The King and I, a Western cowboy who rounds up other cowboys, like the alpha cowboy, is not where you would place Yul Brynner. And as John talked about, he's a Chekhov actor, which they do a lot of gesture work, a lot of posture work. And his posture work, it's not stiff, but he definitely comes across. And even in the movie, he's supposed to be Creole. So he is supposed to be an outcast, sort of outlaw. But it's just the perfect choice, because you never really know what he's thinking. You never really know what he's feeling. And I think that is brilliant. I mean, like, I would say Cillian Murphy does kind of something like that in Peaky Blinders, where it's like the lead of the movie is in charge of everything and you don't really know what's on their mind. And that just makes this so compelling for a lot of the movie, where there's not that much action.
Yeah.
You go scene by scene. You go on a recruitment mission, recruiting 6 people. I think there's an alternate version of this movie where by the time they get their 7 fucking people, they show up to the town and it's just demolished. Because it took them so long to get all of these people. I think that would be a great alt-universe thing of this. But if there's anything to say, you talk about Steve McQueen, everything's great, but it's all about Yule. And I think he does a really good job of anchoring this movie. And
I mean, that scene just played out of my head of where they turn up and the village is destroyed, and now I want to make a movie.
So good. I know. It's exactly.
Well, saloon, yeah.
I liked how I did like how, and I like how they used McQueen's character, who was kind of the number 2, to kind of point that out. There are a few times along the way where he uses some kept using funny quotes, so little life lessons he picked up. So when Yule gives the guns away, when Eli Wallach holds them up, and you think the game is up, and he puts down his guns. And McQueen walks up and says, I once knew a man who threw himself into a cactus patch. And when I asked him why he did it, he said it seemed like a good idea at the time. So there were these few little lines here and there where McQueen's character kind of tells the audience, you're not supposed to know what is going on in Yule's head. But for some reason, we are still following him. So you can follow him too. So there's no judgment. You don't have to worry. Again, I liked it, but it kind of reminded me the whole time. It was you never have to worry about anything. Everyone is completely in line. Everyone believes in Yule. And which again is great. And even in Seven Samurai, the lead samurai, he doesn't falter for a second. You never question whether he's going to fight till he dies. So there wasn't any judgment for that by any means. I did think my goodness, there was a lot of low voices in this movie. They don't make men like they used to, guys.
I did not know Yule's. I did not know Yule's voice was that low. I forgot. I know it is, but man,
yeah, it's all the hormones they're putting in chickens.
Honestly, dude, all those guys were fucking. Yeah. I mean, it was cool. Charles Bronson, small part.
Weird spanking scene. The spanking scene at the end is one of the weirdest spanking scenes I've ever seen in a movie, though. He spanks this boy for speaking up.
Could you imagine being that kid and your one film credit is kid spanked by Charles Bronson?
After he gets to praise him, dream, I think you're great, sir, and he just spanks the shit out of this kid. Oh,
again, I did think that was good for. It might seem kind of obvious, but when you're casting, who would be the least likely to have a little friendship, paternal friendship kind of thing with children? Bronson, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Get that hard edged, war veteran. Let's get him in here. Let's have him. I will say, I did laugh pretty hard the way they covered that one scene where they first walk up on him and he's shirtless and he's chopping wood. They have that for a while. He's trying to work this one stump and he clearly can't get it.
Yeah.
And he's trying to hit it, and eventually, I don't know, he turned the axe around. It was just a technical thing. It was he was done trying to pretend like he was gonna actually be able to chop this stump. Robert Vaughn was good. Had 2 weird scenes that came out of nowhere where he admits how afraid he is. I was like, oh wow.
I thought he was gonna run. Did you think he was gonna run at the end before he does that heroic thing? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I knew he was
empty.
At one point, he had to come back. Yeah. I think the good thing is in this that there are some familiar Western, it's not a traditional Western story. It's a samurai tale, obviously, but there are some traditional Western things. You've got a little bit of gunfight, a little bit of gunplay. You've got the guy that's faster than a gun with his knife. You've got the rule that anytime anyone raises their head slowly and looks up under their hat, someone's gonna fucking die.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. It's all the traditional Western stuff is there, and I think it's kind of good. I did get a really weird vibe on during the opening sequence. The opening of this is great, by the way. They introduced the clear bad guy, and straight up who the bad guys in this film are and who the good guys are in this film. But when all the other guys started coming back in from the village after the bad guys left, and they're all just wearing white and a hat, and I started getting this real Children of the Corn vibe from the fucking village.
Yeah. What was with the white? Yeah, that has to be a Seven Samurai callback too, because they just wear white clothes the whole time.
Yeah, I think it was. My favorite quote in this movie is the graveyards are full of people that are both very young and very proud.
Yeah, that was very good. I really liked their the sequence where they're the young guy is I want this, and they all start going around the room and they're like, you forgot, you won't have a wife, you won't have a family, you won't have a place to lay your head, you won't have friends, and they all kind of start reflecting on what this life is like. That was probably my favorite moment in the movie, just because if you are into Westerns, there's almost always a gunslinger. It's John Wayne and John Ford, it's Clint Eastwood and Leone's, and you always have this archetype of the lone gunman who is bad, but every now and then does something that helps other people out in some weird way. And the context is usually, foiled a little bit by the characters around them. I did like that scene just because I felt like that was them kind of speaking to the genre to say like, hello, we know what we're trying to do here, but the only reason we're here and that maybe this whole thing is believable is because we are all so ashamed of the fact that we actually have no one but each other. And so I did kind of, that scene was very important to me. It made the movie work for me. I thought it was powerful.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things in this where modern culture has ruined it for you. It's like the kids in the mountains when they're sending the signal, and like the kid runs up and waves his hat, and the next kid in the mountain runs up and waves his hat, and the first thing that went through my head was, great, Gondor's sending reinforcements. And
yeah, no, that's all I thought. I was like,
literally it's the beacon signal. Like, oh no, damn you, Lord of the Rings, you ruined me.
How do you feel like they handled? I didn't look up every single actor, but I'm not gonna lie, I went into this expecting like I'm gonna see a lot of white people playing Mexicans, and I don't know what ethnicity they were, but it looked like a good amount of the ensemble were not white people dressed up in makeup, which I appreciated. I think a decent amount of them probably were, but
they're probably not paid very much.
Yeah, of course. I really liked the guy who played the old man, Vladimir Sokolov, who was a big famous actor. How he gave me hardcore Gladiator vibes. The guy who buys Russell Crowe in Gladiator.
Yeah.
I was getting that great. I thought he was really wonderful. And Eli Wallach, who plays the ugly in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He's a wonderful actor. I've always really liked him. It was cool seeing him because it was almost strange. Sometimes, especially movies from this period, I feel like villains often get handed only tropes and that kind of dialogue. I thought it was interesting that, like you said, Dave, it gets established so quickly. And because of that, he kind of ends up being a helm of the movie. I know he's not even there for most of it, but when he is there, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting. He wasn't just this terrible bad guy. I thought it was crazy how he was trying to manipulate and see if they could find a deal.
Yeah, that's
which
the
again,
thing.
I appreciated because I thought he was saying to the audience, like, we are the same. Like, right now in this movie, you think they're the good guys and I'm the bad guy, but ultimately we're all just gunslingers and we just take what we can. I'm trying to make a deal. So I really liked what they did with this character, and I thought he fucking nailed it.
Mm-hmm. And I liked both. I like the younger two. They're two younger guys, so everybody else has made mistakes. I think we're led to believe that 5 out of the 7 are older. Again, Yule's storyline is really interesting, but most of them are older. And so they don't have a lot else going for them. So the $20, they do put a lot of emphasis on the $20. So what you're talking about, John, with the honor of the samurai, we know the $20 isn't a lot, but they do put a lot of emphasis on it. So, I guess it's up to the interpretation, but I do love, there's the one tag along, they don't really understand what's going on. And then he just finds love, a little convenient, but ultimately it plays. But Steve McQueen, when he finally gives that little tiny monologue at the end, because Steve McQueen carries films. So to see him in this small bit part role where I think without even knowing that he was stealing focus, he was trying to steal focus from Yule in the anecdote that John said, I'm not surprised. When he finally says at the end, he's like, you know what? There's a part of me that was just hoping I love this place so much that I would just find a plot of land and just move here. And because of my introduction to this town would be heroic, then I would be treated well. And I would, it's like to have that little tiny piece of backstory going into the last battle, to go into that final fight. Maybe was not typical of Westerns for sure, but it is typical of American movies. And so that was cool because I was worried by the time we finally get to the fight after all these training sequences, I was like, okay, we've seen a little bit of battle, but like, I need some action. I need this last like 10-minute scene. And it was awesome. It really was a great way to close the film. And it wraps up very quick at the end. But I was like, I need a little bit more. And just that one like 25-second monologue that Steve McQueen gave, I thought was really, really, really nice to get me into that final battle.
Yeah. And I do like that they gave him, again, you don't know anything about Yule, but I like that you learn immediately at the beginning that McQueen had been in that little town for a little bit and he was working for the grocer. And then right before he decides to come back, he says that he had gotten like an official job at the grocery. And it was like, so like, no, I know I said what I said, but I do agree with you that they tried, at least for a few of them, to make it maybe about how desperately poor they were, or that, my God, this guy literally, this talented, violent man is going to just end up being a grocer for the rest of his life. That's not possible. He's going to have to do something else. The only thing technically that I don't know I don't know if it worked for me, like just in structure of the movie, the turnaround in the middle from the first attack, how grateful and pumped up the villagers are from their victory when they send them away the first time.
Right.
And then almost immediately they start turning on the seven. I don't know I don't know if I missed something. I almost rewound it. I was like,
there's a section in there where they're celebrating, and the guys have they've basically set up a siege up in the mountains, and they start shooting at them from a distance, and they realize that they haven't left, and that they're still there, and they haven't beaten them.
But they had said, but right before that, I thought Yul and those guys had said they will be back. You can count on it.
Yeah, but they're still riding high.
We only killed like 15 of them. I don't know, because they had just gone around like the room, like telling stories of how like I was so scared and I did such a good job, and they were all pumping each other up and patting each other on the back, and then they got shot at, a handful of times. They killed those three. The seven went out and killed those three. They come back and those guys are fucking scared as shit. I only needed I don't know what I needed, but it was probably teeny tiny that maybe would have connected that a little better for me. That was the only part where I felt like I was watching a movie. I think
the one thing that took me out of it was the music. Occasionally it definitely felt like they'd left some of the like samurai music in, and at times I was wondering, was the composer actually watching the same fucking film he was writing?
Honestly, dude, I thought the same thing, because I love Elmer Bernstein. He wrote
Millie. He won an Oscar for Millie.
So many things.
But yeah, like
the courthouse drama, Atticus Finch, help me out. Kill a Mockingbird. That's like one of my favorite old scores. And I was watching this and I was thinking the same thing, like, did he just read the script and write? Like, I wonder what order they gave music to it, because I don't know if the music worked for me.
They're riding along a river, and the music's like da 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 da. It's like this doesn't match at all.
Yeah. Maybe they just wanted to camp it up. It was a little the music was a little campy.
It did feel like it threw it into that family place for me again, which I was like, I don't know if I know it's America, so of course America would do this, but I don't think families were taking their children to see Seven Samurai. So I don't know why they didn't try. They should have made an adult movie of this, but again, it still works.
I think they did.
Fine.
There's a lot of death. There's a lot of killing.
I haven't seen it. There's a lot of death, but are you talking about the one last year or 2 years ago?
Oh, no. Sorry. I mistook what you meant when you said it.
I'm sure they did.
Oh. They made
the
Magnificent Seven.
Look, I'm sure you all have a little more to say about it.
I don't know. I don't know what it was called.
I feel like we're coming around. I feel like we've given this a pretty good endorsement. It is available for free. It's available for free on Prime. If you have a subscription, obviously. Anything else that we left on the table, I feel like that was a good place to leave it. I think you should see it. It's not exactly the Western if you just need to see a Western, but it covers some of that ground. There's some good stuff in there. Anything else? Awesome. Well, without further ado, we're gonna send it off to a break so that I can replace this peeler with the fucking bottle opener. And and we're gonna talk about.
Seriously, for 5 minutes before
it
that,
looks,
I was wondering
it's
what
orange.
the fuck you were doing with a vegetable
It looks like
peeler.
A carrot.
No,
for 5 minutes, you've been.
I was hoping he was going to make
his face.
I was hoping he was going to make
his
noise or play a jingle when I opened a beer
like,
or
why is
something.
Jeff so upset?
Anyway. So this is going to be the Oscar winner for Best Picture 1960, Billy Wilder, who, by the way, won 6 Oscars in his life. Billy Wilder's The Apartment coming up. See you soon, film fans. And we're back.
We're back. Whoa.
We are back.
I think my brain just came out my nose from the headphones.
Yeah, so loud.
I might have just overloaded my microphone and your ears. Guys, we're back. I hope you had a good time listening to us talk about the Magnificent Seven. I'm hoping you're drinking along with us because we are going to be talking about Billy Wilder's The Apartment. Somehow a sex comedy in the 1960s. Somehow, or I guess technically the end of the 50s, break into the 60s here. A sex comedy from 1960, The Apartment, which stars Jack Lemmon, who is 35, although in 1960, 35 looks a whole lot like 55. He is... he is a man who tries to rise in his company by letting its executives use his apartment for trysts, that means fucking, But complications and a romance of his own ensue. That is the short version. The longer storyline is mild-mannered C.C. Baxter, that's Jack Lemmon, has been working at Consolidated Life, an insurance company, for close to 4 years. I don't know what he was doing from ages 22 to 30. Doesn't matter. And is one of close to 32,000 employees located in their Manhattan head office. 32,000. They talk about this all the time in the movie. 32,000 employees.
I mean, hats off for them knowing stats without having to look them up on their iPhone.
How about that?
Yeah.
To distinguish himself from all the other lowly cogs in the company.
We can't do that.
He hopes to move up the corporate ladder, and in doing so, he lets the executives in the company who could possibly offer him a promotion use his apartment for affairs on their wives, which just happens to be located off of Central Park West. It is a very big one-bedroom apartment that somehow a lowly insurance salesman can afford this ridiculous apartment that today would probably be like $3,500 a month.
Well, the rent was $85 a fucking month. I mean...
Yes, I did. Yes,
me
that's right.
Me and my wife are sitting there. We nearly fell out of our chair when he said what the rent was.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when women and people of color can't earn money because it's 1960, I guess... even I feel weird making that point, but that's
get in there,
true.
get in there, and make it uncomfortable.
All right. So anyway, he lets his all of these executives are cheating on their wives in his apartment. That is the story, and then he ends up falling for the elevator girl, Shirley MacLaine, who it turns out may be involved with one of the other executives in the office, while Jack Lemmon is trying to very sweetly hit on her. That's the pitch. I think it's pretty fun. It's basically Neil Simon that turns very, very quickly into Requiem for a Dream.
It's pretty funny and a little dark.
Yeah, if you guys know Promises, or I guess Thoroughly Modern Millie, or a lot of these comedies that because of the way that they're delivered, they seem very nonchalant and casual, but really they are sex comedies about people who cheat on their wives and how it's totally okay and the wives are crazy for being freaked out by it. So it has a little bit of that going on it, but it is self-aware. I think it's just self-aware enough. It's just self-aware enough. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it. Who wants to take it from there? Dave, I see you itching to say something.
I'll tell you, I'm not entirely sure this was the movie to watch the day after my first wedding anniversary.
Right.
So we sat down and watched it together. But there's some really interesting things in it. In that, for the insurance floor, where they put him right in the middle of it's literally hundreds of people.
It feels like a musical.
It makes him feel tiny, and but apparently in shooting that scene, the studio wasn't as big as that room was, so they used forced perspective at the back, and all the people at the back are kids in suits, and they shrunk the desks as they go backwards.
Wow!
To make it seem smaller, yeah. So there's a whole forced perspective thing in that office, yeah. So I like little things like that, but that's just one thing that just makes this movie good. It's funny. It's damn funny. The jokes land, and then it turns a little dark, and then it gets the jokes get a little bit further. But with the opening of this movie, I had a couple of times where I laughed out loud.
There's a line early on where one of these girls that's dating the executive who's married goes, "You bring other girls up here?" And he goes, "Of course not. I'm a happily married man."
Yes.
And she's a mistress. There's a lot of those.
And that's an appropriate answer, apparently.
Yeah, very Neil Simon.
Yeah.
I should have stayed in bed this morning. I should have stayed in bed last night. There's a lot of those kinds of lines that are kind of good singers. This
is basically the movie of the world's first and most deviant Airbnb.
Yes, that's exactly right. John?
I adore this movie. I know I have mentioned this before on this podcast. Billy Wilder is without a doubt my favorite classic Hollywood director.
Really?
Oh yeah. Without a fucking doubt, dude. I may have made that point a million times before, but I don't give a fuck. I think it is earned. Listen
What's
to
your
this
favorite?
list leading
Dublin
up to the apartment.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard is my favorite.
Right. Okay. That's
But leading up to this, so he has Double Indemnity in 44, Lost Weekend in 45, A Foreign Affair in 48, Sunset Boulevard 50, Ace in the Hole, Stalag 17, Sabrina, A Witness for the Prosecution, which is a fucking incredible courtroom drama. And then Some Like It Hot, boom, 59, 60, The Apartment. I mean, this guy, and he wrote all these movies he had a partner every time he wrote them. But to expand what you guys are talking about, I feel like he referred to Ernst Lubitsch, who he assistant directed for before he started doing his own stuff. And that guy was just kind of a comedic genius. If you watch all of these movies, it doesn't matter if it's technically a drama or technically a comedy. He understands how to blend those elements in all of them, which is why he is infamous for talking about how whenever they were writing stuff and whenever they were in production, he never let anyone refer to genre. He didn't let anyone say we're making a comedy, which is why I think he gets away with, I think The Apartment might be the best example of it. He understands that to let people inside on a story, especially to relate to a character, especially when, they know something that we don't know, they're going to be dealing with heavy elements of suicide. We're ready to laugh about mistresses and infidelity, which is kind of fucked up. And I think he knows that. When we're kind of, he's satirizing that at the beginning. We don't know that we're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. We don't know what's going to turn into that drama. So I think this movie is a perfect example of his genius of being able to invite you in with laughs and incredible acting. His casting is always wonderful. I think Jack Lemmon is absolutely incredible in this movie. But that middle sequence, when Shirley MacLaine tries to overdose after Fred McMurray has been lying to her and she finally figures it out and she decides to take a bunch of sleeping pills. There's this huge sequence in the middle where Jack Lemmon basically has to nurse her back to health for 2 days. And the movie feels like a different movie. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It works for me. I think it fits fucking perfectly into this puzzle, and it turns the screw just enough so that the rest of this world that you had been kind of like thrust into with these men in suits and insurance companies laughing and joking about all these women they're fucking, and you never see their wives, you never hear their wives' names. There's that one line that Jack Lemmon has where Fred McMurray says, it would be unfair to, it's just an unfair thing to do. And Jack Lemmon says, especially for your wife, sir. And then they just blow right past it. Like it's the only time anyone ever mentions anyone's wife. I think Wilder also understood, which is, I could not stop thinking about this. I mentioned it in the Magnificent Seven conversation. There are different styles of performance in this movie. I think Wilder and Jack Lemmon, I doubt it was conscious. I doubt they sat down and said, let's talk about this. But they have a lot of that presentational, gimmicky, very clever dialogue style of acting in the beginning. And then this middle section, Shirley MacLaine's voice fucking drops right on her diaphragm. They're whispering to each other. They're having intimate conversation. Even Jack Lemmon's style shifts and his voice drops like an octave. Yeah, I'm gushing. I don't fucking care.
Yeah, we got the gush. We got the gush.
Oh, gush all day for this movie. Jack Lemmon's voice drops like a fucking octave when he's talking with her. And it feels so different and it connects. So I also feel like Billy Wilder understood that there is a way to do that presentational thing. And with good writing, you can still make it serious. But we're also moving into a different area where he had more tools to play with at this point. There was a lot of realism in the middle of this movie. Do you agree with that, Jeff? Yeah. Especially from an acting perspective, do you guys think that?
Yeah, this is another time where Jeff says this seems like a play. I've already said it seems like a musical, but especially, and Dave, you could talk about the production design too. Is the how they show the apartment to be open, so it doesn't look like it's on a film set. You can see multiple rooms at the same time, so it does feel like a space that they're actually living in. This won an Oscar for art direction through too, that.
Yep.
And director, writing, best picture. But yes, John, to your point, it feels like two people that are interacting in their homes as opposed to they're playing on a set.
Which the rest of the movie does feel like that. Yeah. That's why it was so interesting to me. I feel like they knew exactly what they were doing because it did, it sunk into something else. Dave, I want to ask you about, because when I got obsessed with Wilder and I started watching interviews, I wasn't surprised to learn this, but when I first was just watching his movies, I couldn't stop thinking about how, like the example you gave is a perfect good example. Perfectly good example. All of his design is sexy, but he does not move his camera very much. He is not a showy director. And when you watch his interviews, he's very very against showy directors. He does not believe the camera should move unless it absolutely has to. He thinks cast your actors, set that fucker still, and let's have a good script and let them go to work.
He'll sit the camera somewhere and let the actor come to it.
But it is always in the perfect place.
Yeah.
So even a moment in the middle, there's a moment in the middle where it's not the most genius way to do this, but the way he milks it, where Jack Lemmon finds the mirror. And he realizes, folks at home, you don't need to know all the details, but this is the clue that Jack Lemmon finally has, where he realizes Shirley MacLaine is hooking up with his boss.
He nailed that realization too.
And he nailed it.
Yeah, that's one of those film moments.
And yet, you guys, I don't know how, there were 3 setups. It was a wide shot of the whole thing. Of the room. It cut across to look at her, and then it cut to this close-up of Jack when he was just looking at the mirror, and that was all that was necessary, and really good dialogue underneath, where she says that line, it makes me feel how I see myself how I feel, or I can't remember what the line is. So it also was just a fucking lesson in, these guys are not Scorsese, they're not Tarantino, they're not these more contemporary auteurs. These guys, all the people from back then made like 50, 60 movies in their career. They're pumping out like 1 a year. So they didn't have 5 years between projects to think up all this stuff. So they needed all of their movies to make money, to stay valuable within their contracts. And I just feel like he is the master of, you were entertained in this movie. I think anyone could sit down and be entertained.
Also, to put it in a modern,
it's going to go deeper.
In a modern context, it's kind of similar to Boogie Nights. It's to a lesser extent Wolf of Wall Street, and also the movie Falling Down.
Yes.
Where in particular Falling Down, because at the beginning that like he gets angry and just leaves his car and goes on a rampage across the city, telling people what he really thinks, and you're along for the ride, and you're like, this is great. And it's the same. It's like these guys are having these flings, and they're being all showy about it, and you're like, and then the consequences full in the face, and it hits you, and you're like, this is not cool. It's like the moment where in Falling Down, where he lets the guy like die basically on the golf course. Yeah. And that's where you're like, it's a moment of realization for you as an audience member. It's like, I shouldn't be like on his side at all. Yeah. And I like Lemmon plays it so well as well that by the end of the movie, you're almost screaming at the screen. It's like, just tell them the fucking truth. Tell them the truth. Dump these guys in it. Because you're taking the hit for people who do not give a shit about you. Like, it made me angry, and I think it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I was trying to think, do you guys have any suggestions for, I mean, that is a good example, Falling Down, the other movies you mentioned, but I was trying to think of a contemporary equivalent for someone who blends genre really well, specifically like this, who uses comedy and really talented actors and complex scripts, but there are comedic elements that invite you in, and then they turn the screw. I was trying to think of a good contemporary example of that, because a lot of our comedic directors and actors usually stay within their genre. Like Judd Apatow never goes too much deeper than his jokes. The material is there. You know what he's trying to say, and it kind of stays there the whole time. I'm not saying it's not. Yeah. It doesn't have any kind of depth.
Some of James Gunn's work, to an extent, does that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, example. Things like Slither, where it starts off all fun and games and it ends just completely disgusting.
Yeah.
Maybe nothing with quite the romance though of this. That not just the romance is in the love story, but just like that lush kind of magical, like kind of draw you in.
I think you mentioned it, but I think
personal level.
Some of Paul's early work, Paul Thomas Anderson, like Boogie Nights is kind of a good example. Like it does Punch Drunk Love.
Punch Drunk Love. Maybe Punch Drunk Love. It's a romance, but it's also a thriller.
It's like, the party's happening and then the lights come on and the party's over. And then you have to deal with the consequences. And that's exactly what this movie does. Just honest.
Were you guys, how uncomfortable are you?
Maybe Mendez, but Mendez never really.
No, he's more like sincere drama. Did you have one in mind specifically? Because I feel like he's so heavy.
No. American Beauty, or even Away We Go. I mean, maybe, but not quite the same.
It's still so dark initially, though. Whereas like this, like you just feel like, oh, this sad guy, and he's just so jovial. He's so fucking charming.
The way this one turns on your head, where it's like How to Succeed. Like, I can't believe Jack Lemmon didn't have a song in the first 30 minutes, like with how it was set up and everything. And you know what else Billy Wilder's really good at this is people always talk about with directors, it's almost annoying when everybody's like, well, it's his attention to detail. And you're like, of course it's this fucking attention to detail that makes him better than everybody else. But one thing that's really interesting is Jack Lemmon's neurotic, so he keeps leaving. and he keeps forgetting things that you, the audience, see. And it gives you that moment of kind of like, oh, he left the glove. And then Jack Lemmon stops and comes back and gets the glove. But the camera isn't indicative. It doesn't show like Jack leaving and then come back. And then it gets hectic. Like a lot of American comedies nowadays are just a little hectic where it's moving so much. Because, as John, you were talking about the still frame, when the actor leaves, it's weird to not follow them. And even at the time, it's not a traditional master. So it's not just like they exit stage right. It's like you can see him walking towards the door, but you can still see the glove. So as the audience, maybe this is hard to understand in a podcast, but it's like, it's all I'm saying is there's not a scene where a scene is like, okay, it's time to end and we move on. There's always something that's got you hooked. There's always, even if it's just a little detail,
he's notorious
like
for the hook.
Was forgotten or lost.
That's a signature move. Yeah. Apparently, Jack Lemmon, for years after this movie, people would come up to him and ask him for the key.
Yeah, which is, of course.
Really, I was thinking about the tissues. Do you remember when he leaves? He's like kind of sick, and so he leaves the tissues on the desk of his boss's desk. Detail. And then he's literally out the door, and then he looks, and then he like runs back in and takes the tissues off the desk, and then walks away. And it's just, I don't know what this sounds like at home to you listening, but it's just, as an audience member, you're like, oh shit, they're good. Yeah,
dude.
You know what I mean? Like there's just
he talks all the time.
Like, wow, that's
he talks
good.
all the time.
That's
no,
good.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's a couple of things as well where you see exactly how much times have changed. Like when he's walking down the street with her, and he says, "Oh, it's right around the corner from where you live," and she's like, "How do you know where I live?" And he's like, "Oh, I pulled your insurance card. I know this. I know that. I know your social security number." I'm like, I'm sorry. That conversation these days will get you fucking maced and a restraining order. It's, but she took it in stride. She's like,
Shirley,
yeah, great.
Shirley MacLaine was
wonderful,
fantastic in this film. Jack Lemmon is by far he's obviously the lead, but he's the central storyline, and she's sort of she's the lesson in a way, I guess. Like a lot is happening to her, and so she makes some decisions that she has to sort of deal with, and other people have to deal with it around her. So she has a tricky role, let's put it that way. But whether she's being nonchalant, whether there's stakes, she just is really, really good, especially for 1960.
They both,
like everybody talks about Brando.
I love at the beginning though. She plays it really sprightly and alive. Like
definitely.
She has more personality than the other elevator operators. She knows everyone's name. She's doing little like flourishes and embellishments and it just makes when you find out what's going on with her, it makes it all the more like brutal. It's like, oh, this happy, fantastic character that I really loved at the beginning of this movie has a dark side. But when he at the end of near the end of the film, when he hands her that money and she sells the whole thing, like, you know exactly where this is going from a look. And it's a phenomenal performance. You can really tell when someone's in it. Like she communicated exactly what the next 30 minutes of the movie was going to be with one look.
Yeah, fairly powerful. And Jeff, to your point, I feel like again, that's why it's so brilliant, is because this whole movie is obviously Jack's perspective until that sequence happens when she tries to commit suicide. And within that huge sequence, you start to see things through her perspective. So it's almost like you were Jack.
Yeah.
And you kind of, everybody knew what the deal was. You knew he was kind of a little pathetic, maybe a little bit of a sucker, maybe a little bit too hard with work, and he was letting people take advantage of him, right?
He gave his apartment
without
key
a doubt, right?
bosses.
Without a doubt. And then by the time you're with her long enough, even though she is the sick one and Jack is taking care of her, you start to see Jack through her eyes. And then suddenly you realize, wait, I am her.
Yeah.
So that by the time she leaves that scenario, you are following her lesson as well. She has her own story that is completely her own by the time you get there. When they introduce her, she doesn't. You think she is going to be somebody's girlfriend or one of the mistresses, and we're just going to watch her get her heart broken. We didn't know we were going to get our heart broken and make that decision on New Year's with her. Yeah. It's super surprising.
I'm gonna push a little bit towards the end. Everybody at home, watch this movie. It's fantastic. Did the last 15 minutes work for you, or did they get a little Hollywood eyes?
So I wanted to ask you about that, because that is Billy Wilder infamously never writes his final acts until they're filming. So they usually have an idea of how they want to end it, but once they get the original first two in the can, they're writing as they go with that last part, because they want to see if everything worked up until then. They usually try to wrap it up. It feels different. And I know what you mean. I would not judge anyone if they said it felt like a different part of the movie. I don't know if it wrapped up too cleanly. Did it literally bother you the entire last 10 or 15, or was it just the final moment on the couch?
No, I wouldn't mind just the final moment if there were like 3 different scenes with resolute callbacks. There was like, I'm leaving to be a mensch. And I was like, that's not even that good of a callback. And then there were like 3 different comeuppances that happened in a row that were just a little too clean. So if it was just the final couch moment, I actually would have been like 1960 and it doesn't resolve the way you want it to, like, or, you know, like, fine, great. I love that. But the fact that there was one with the boss and one with her and one with him, like the fact that there were a bunch and they were all so clean, it was almost like, no, we want to wrap these up and everybody feels good at the end. It was too much.
I know what you mean.
But it was only like 5 minutes. So it's worth watching the rest of the movie.
This is a very specific observation, but the only reason why it didn't feel too happy ending Hollywood for me is that they literally don't kiss this entire movie. They don't touch each other the entire time. Even when it's the happy ending and she runs to him at the end.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I know what you mean, though. Like, it does feel a little bit like, all right, let's wrap this up. Let's have everybody make their decisions and let's get them back together and have them learn their lessons.
I didn't get that at all. By the time I got to that point, I wanted that.
Great.
I wanted that, and I was given that, and totally. I walked away happy.
And the fact that he's leaving the apartment nailed it for me. That's why I was totally. If he had not been leaving the apartment, he was the exact same, and she ran back to him, I would have been weird. But the fact that they were both in transit by the end of it emotionally, I thought like, and even then, again, they don't kiss, and she doesn't say "I love you" back to him. So it did work for me, where I was like, okay, like this is the beginning. Okay, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I did want to say just one last comment about the
and shout out
about how you were saying, like, how does it, with the glove comment, like, how do we follow that as audience members? Dave, I wanted to ask you if you agree with me on this. He chose to shoot this in black and white, and the studio said, why are you doing that? And he was like, fuck you, I'm doing it in black and white. And they were like, okay. It's moments like that I think they were able to get away with really wonderfully designed black and white cinematography and production design. We saw that glove on the coffee table because it was white. And because of everything was the way they lit everything in that one shot, it was kind of all you were looking at. It was the other counterpoint of the frame with the doorway and Jack. And so when he left, there was this stark thing on the coffee table that was totally subconscious until the door closed, and it was the only white thing in the bottom part of the frame. So I wonder also if there's, because I have heard those old Hollywood directors talk all the time about how much more they were able to do within the frame in terms of storytelling without moving the camera for all this crazy coverage because of black and white cinematography. Dave, do you feel like there's, were you thinking about any of that kind of stuff at all after watching this, or when you watch these old movies?
I vaguely noticed it happening, but by that point I was too wrapped up in what was going on to pay too much attention to it. But I mean, you can do the same thing in color. It's just, it's contrast is what you're looking for there, and they nailed it. Like both, all of those shots, like with the shot from the phone where she's walking up to the phone, it's like, that's what I said before. He puts his camera in a place and lets the actor find it.
Yes. I mean, a lesson for all of us too, right? Like, we all want to move our camera around. We want the oneer. We want to do all this stuff. And then you watch old movies like this and you're like, I guess all you really need is economical and appropriate camera placement, a good script, and really good actors. And you're probably going to get people to enjoy themselves.
There's no
you're
one
not reinventing the wheel.
There's no one tool for every job, but sometimes that technique really, really works. Yeah, and especially for something like comedy, I feel like the more static your camera is, and you rely on cuts, it works. And I mean, this was also was nominated for editing and won, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to give a shout out to his inspiration for this movie came from one of my absolute favorite movies, David Lean's A Brief Encounter. Before he made fucking Lawrence of Arabia. Noel Coward, yeah. It was when he made like 5 or 6 Noel Coward films early in his career. David Lean, right after he's transitioned from editing to directing. And A Brief Encounter is one of the greatest romances ever fucking made. It's Casablanca level. And Billy Wilder saw it. He was so inspired by it. And he walked away thinking, what happened to the guy? Because at one point, the guy that she's hooking up with in Brief Encounter asked his friend if he can use his apartment because he's seeing this wife that he met at a train station. And he was like, I wonder what happened. Cool. What about that guy? But just in general, I just love that Billy Wilder saw a movie that is just so wonderful and has so much romance and it's so dark, and it is that underbelly that clearly Billy Wilder is interested in. All of his movies are about the kind of mischievous, darker side of regular humans that we don't really talk about. Yeah, I'm gushing.
That's 2 gushes in the same segment. That's 2 weeks in a row for you.
I'm good at
John,
that.
you're a fucking gusher, man. You gush. This is a positive film podcast, and John is a gusher.
Living it. He's living the dream.
That is so 2 happy. Gush alarms.
It was a
Have you guys ever seen this before? Was this your first time?
This is the first time I'd seen this.
First time,
and I'm so glad I did.
Seen other Billy,
like
but
this, I couldn't find. I think anyone in my circle of friends who wouldn't enjoy this movie.
Me neither, right?
Same.
All of his movies are like that too. Good. I'm so glad we watched it. Thank
guys,
you for letting me make you guys watch this.
how fun is that holiday party? The holiday party at this company, everybody, there's making out, they're dancing on tables, the punch is spiked. It is. What happened to holiday parties?
Yeah.
What happened?
A rousing chorus of
the last good work
bells.
party I saw was in the Santa Claus. Remember his Christmas party? That looked pretty fun when we were kids.
The Santa Claus? You kidding me? Yeah, the last good work party.
So
No, but it
glad
made
you
me
didn't
think
say
of,
Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh my God! Fuck yeah! It did make me think of Mad
right.
Men.
Maybe after the 80s.
Yeah.
After the 80s, people said, and now after Me Too, we're never having the holiday parties again. But
Oh my
especially
God.
knowing that all of those makeouts, somebody was cheating on somebody else in this movie. But that holiday party was fun.
It did look super fun.
But again, to Billy Wilder, that's why it's so great that's where the moment of realization happens at the holiday party where everybody's having such a good time. And then Jack Lemmon's world gets, and she's in a bad mood too
and
for a different reason.
It's his highest.
It's great.
He had just got promoted.
Yeah.
It's his absolute tip top. Boom. Oh God, it's just good storytelling.
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. Anyway, watch The Apartment. It's on Prime as well for free. This is, we are just promoting Amazon and maybe someday in the future they're going to pay taxes for all the roads they use, because I'm pretty sure their trucks use roads. So I don't know why
I'll
they
turn
don't
a
need to pay
blind eye
taxes
if they
for
want to
those trucks.
sponsor us.
You're right. If they cast me on a show,
If you want to pay your
despite everything I
taxes
said.
through sponsorship to the Love of Cinema Pod, we will.
Yeah.
We will accept.
Jeff, I know
Falls in your
you
court.
shit all over that Netflix show, but it's totally fine by us. You just have to stop talking about Jeff Bezos not paying taxes. Okay, fans, that's it. Billy Wilder's The Apartment, available on Prime for your subscription. Dave, are you ready to hype us up for what the fuck we are going to be watching next week? We haven't even cursed that much. Who the fuck are we this week? We are just like,
We go back to the 60s and look what happens.
we are film fans. All right, Dave, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right.
Also, Dave, my mom really liked listening to your voice on last week's podcast. She wanted me to tell you that.
Oh,
what year are we doing this next week?
Why would you throw a curveball like that? Oh,
Right in the middle of the little introduction sound, you just fucking bulldozed that little noise.
I mean, that's fine. Hi, Jeff's mom.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Dave.
We are doing. That was extremely inappropriate. I'm sorry. Okay. John's not going to be happy. We're coming back to the 2000s.
Great. I love
Right
it.
at the end of the
Cool.
scale, 2018.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I
Are
know.
you
It's
serious?
it's like a year before we
Fucking
started.
Crazy.
Oh my God.
Wow.
This is a
Yeah.
huge year. Well, we have a lot to unpack, film fans. We are going to do this off the mic to save us 3 minutes of contemplating annoying shit for you. So we are going to take a break. We're going to talk about it, and we will see you in 10 seconds to tell you about our third film from 1960. See you soon. And we're back! At the end of this segment, we are going to let you know the name of the 3 films that we are going to discuss next year from the film year 2018. But first, we need to finish 1960. We needed a redemption film. We thought about Little Shop of Horrors is actually pretty decent film. We also talked about The Alamo, the John Wayne directorial debut.
We were dead set on it. We were like, oh, that's perfect. Let's do it. And then we looked up the length.
Yeah, it was like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and we were like,
Yeah,
no,
for a
no,
directorial
no.
feature.
Yeah, for our redemption, our directorial feature redemption segments. I'm not watching a 2 hour and 44 minute movie. I'm just not fucking doing it anymore. We've done it in the past. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was 2 hours and 25 minutes. It's just never going to happen again.
That is a long acid trip.
So we chose a nice, tight 1 hour, 25-minute film from 1960, directed by William Castle, who would go on to produce Rosemary's Baby in 1968. He is a contemporary of Roger Corman. The two of them were known for very, very low-budget horror films. They tried to do gags and gimmicks in the theater, as I talked about before, where they would have skeletons and screams live in the theater in the 50s. So 1960 comes along, and he does this film called 13 Ghosts, right? I will say the 13 ghosts are seen in this film. You will see all of them. They sound just like the aliens from Toy Story. The claw. That's exactly how these ghosts sound in the film.
Yeah.
He is soon to be outdone by...
Yeah, don't get me wrong. You see them in the first 2 minutes of this film because they sit there and my first impression of this was,
God,
oh my
terrible.
fucking God, they're going to make you go through all 13 of
all
these. All
13?
The ghost,
And you did!
The ghost just comes at you with a...
no.
But
And they did it with a number.
It's got a little number in the corner. It's like, put a fucking
They went
football jersey on it.
1, 2, and you're like, oh my God, 13 more. You basically, they should just say, everybody count backwards from 100, and then we're going to start. That's basically what they should have done.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You can be late to this movie is what we're saying.
Yeah. Castle and Corman kept going while somehow Alfred Hitchcock cracked the code, and then he did Psycho in 1960, and then his films like North by Northwest and Rear Window and stuff, they turned into horror films in the 60s, so they figured out where horror was headed. William Castle was not quite there yet, but this is a horror comedy. It's available for free if you have a Roku device. It's pretty funny. It's pretty short. It's about a family who, you know what, I'll just give you the IMDb here. The short version is, a family inherits what proves to be a haunted house, surprise, surprise, but a special pair of goggles allows them to see their ghostly tormentors. I'm going to say that again.
Dum, 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 dum.
A special pair of goggles, not glasses, goggles.
He spent years on the lenses.
Allows to see their ghostly tormentors. And the longer version of this is, reclusive Dr. Zorba has died and left his eerie mansion to his penniless nephew, Cyrus Zorba, and his family. Along with the house, the Zorba family has also inherited the occultist's collection of 13 ghosts. Apparently that's a collection that he has.
And his housemate.
And his housemate, who we're going to talk more about for sure. So the housemate, who they actually refer to as a witch, ... They refer to as a witch. Yeah. She comes with the house. And there are ghosts in the house that can only be seen through the special goggles. The family members, their lives are at risk. They discover... I'll just say it. This is because this comes like halfway through the movie, but it really is a lifeline for me. It turns out the reason that the house was left for them wasn't the ghosts and the scary and the spooky. It was because there was money hidden in the house that was only meant for the family. That was completely off the books by their now deceased grandfather. I think that's a pretty good gag. I think it's a horror comedy. I don't know how horrible it is.
That's a pretty good gag. You said it came in halfway through. That comes in an hour into the fucking movie. There's only 20 minutes left.
2/3 of the way through. Whatever. All right, so Dave loved this film. Why don't we go with John first? John, initial thoughts of this film. You're laughing already. You know, if we watched this together, the three of us, we would have had fun. So let's just preface that by saying.
Yeah, first, just to echo what you said, Dave, like when they started counting down the ghosts at the beginning, I was like, uh-oh. Even before that, the sound effects over like the Columbia label, the Columbia Pictures, they were just like, oh, ah! Just like screams and ghost noises just happening for no reason. There was some cool like bleeding visual stuff that was happening initially, but then it just felt like it was too much. Like it just went too much all the time. This is my big picture takeaway from this movie. Horror movies weren't actually scary yet. And that's okay. That's okay. All those old Hammer, London Hammer movies, the old monster movies, the Universal adapted, The Mummy, Dracula, like those are fun. There's fun horror classic movies, but they didn't get scary yet. And I would even say, Hitchcock is suspenseful and thrilling. Even he doesn't like scare me. We're about a decade away from movies actually getting scary. I wasn't expected to be scared. So this is not why I'm critiquing this, but I was not, I had to look this up just to remind myself. This is before ratings, right? The rating system didn't exist yet. The Motion Picture Association of America had not started doing that yet. So the whole time I was watching this, I was like, is this a family movie? Like, are they? Do they want?
Why are you even
I thought this
thinking
was
that?
like a. This is like a.
Why is that even on your mind?
They were casting like a wide net. Like nothing. Everything felt very wholesome.
Yeah, it's like Leave It to Beaver with moaning.
I was just thinking Leave It to Beaver. Yes. That's just what I was thinking with the boy.
That guy who plays I looked up that bit of trivia, which I'm sure you guys saw that as well. Charles Herbert, who plays the father Leave It to Beaver character, this is the last movie he ever made.
Oh, that's funny. I actually didn't
First
see
piece
that.
of trivia on IMDb, I was like, what is going on with this guy? There's that one moment where the son asks him, sorry, this is very specific, film fans, but I have to laugh with my two buddies here. His acting was just, I don't want to pick on this guy.
The work was bad. The work was bad.
There was one moment where the kid's like, yeah, I'll drink. There's one moment where the kid's like, what about the ghost, Dad? Do you think they'll know when we're here? And he has a scene where he's like, son, it's fine. He's like, but what about tonight? And he goes, oh. And he like turns and like looks back at the child with like everything was so fake. It just felt like it felt like it was trying to shove that father knows best tone down your throat while also trying to genuinely scare you. And I just kept confusing me. I was like, I don't understand why they keep going back and forth between these two things. If the family, I thought the mother was the best. If the family was more scared, I would be more scared. But they kept, every time they were together as a family, I felt like they were not trying to let us have scary feelings with them. I'm giving this movie a lot of credit. This movie was fucking terrible. But I feel like that was the main problem with it. Was that I felt like I was watching two different movies the whole time.
Buzz.
I don't know. Did you guys feel that way?
I still think it's fun for everybody to fucking. We did not expect this movie to be good. So
I was definitely watching the one. I was watching the one shit movie the whole time.
Okay. Yeah.
I still think nobody's seen this movie watching. It's a funny enough gag with the goggles, which by the way, they did not use the goggles correctly in this film. They definitely could have done better with that. He puts the goggles on and the ghosts just catch on fire. Like, what the fuck is that? This is a ghost horror. There's just like, also there's 3 ghosts that just like communicate to each other every night. It's really strange, but
they hang out.
It was a good enough gimmick that they tried to do a quote unquote remake, meaning they just took the gag of the goggles and they tried to make it again in 2001. So it was at least catchy enough to have some legs.
Yeah, I thought I'd give that a look and see if it was any better. And it's not that much better.
No, it's not much better. But I remember it at least. I just remember. I don't know. I remember thinking
Matthew Lillard.
By the way, that's the best work Mr. Herbert did in the whole movie was when he first put the goggles on and was scared of the fire ghost and he's screaming like a maniac. I was like, why are we at 100 and 0 this whole time? This guy is either screaming at a ghost he can't see or he is just completely vacant. Anyway, I feel like I'm giving Herbert a hard time.
Dave, what were you saying?
My first note here, I made it about halfway through the movie.
I'm glad you took notes during this.
And it's
13 ghosts.
Very professional of you.
Like, what is this movie trying to do?
Exactly.
Like, let's just focus for a second on the Illusiono gimmick, which is the current gimmick he used to try and sell this film, probably because he knew it was a giant flaming piece of shit. But,
it's Mr. Castle.
The whole movie's shot in black and white, but the ghosts were composited over and were tinted red. So you were given this pair of glasses when you walked into the theater, and they had a red film and a blue film. It was all red or all blue. You could switch it between the two. So the idea was, if you were brave enough, you'd switch it to red, and you'd be able to see the ghosts in the movie. If you switch it to blue, the ghosts disappear.
That's cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, that was the gimmick they used to try and sell this film. If you're brave enough, you'll switch it to red and see the ghosts. Yeah, no, fucking hell.
But hold on. I am curious though. Unpack that for a second. Are you against the idea of that gimmick, or do you think it just didn't work because the ghosts weren't scary? Because how badass would that have been if he would have scared the fucking shit out of people in 1960?
I have no problem at all with a gimmick like that being thrown into a movie, as long as the movie is good. You don't just rely on the gimmick.
Yeah. The ghosts, you guys, they were not scary at all. Like, I'm not even talking about the execution of them. Like, even just the writing of them. Every single one of the ghosts, because they tell you multiple times what, like, the names of the ghosts and a little bit of, like, where they're from. That's basically the essence of their origin.
They give them a curtain call too.
They came from.
Yeah, they have a curtain call at the end.
They get an intro and a curtain call. Yeah, I was waiting for like the kick line. If they had just added 1 or 2 sentences to the origin to tell you what's so fucked up about how they died,
Right.
So I don't know. I just feel like there was nothing.
There was only one. There's only one. The guy whose head got bit off by the lion is the only one.
Okay, let me stop it there at that too, because that lion tamer ghost, like
why was that a 10-minute scene between?
Yeah, the lion becomes apparent. Like he sees the lion ghost, and then he sees the lion tamer ghost, and the lion tamer ghost is dancing around like a fool, and then he basically gets his empty neck and sticks it in the lion's mouth and like hits the lion's head with it, and the lion swats him, and the guy goes flying backwards, and I'm like, hang on a minute. In this plate shot, is this guy just in a headless costume fucking pissing off a lion?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
And then the cut out of that, the editing was terrible. The cut out of that particular sequence, they decided, they were like, just let it roll until the lion actually bit the top of the fake neck, and they were like, cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Cut before OSHA sees it. Yeah.
Boom. And it's funny because it was like a man who's brave enough to put his head in a lion's mouth, and then as soon as the lion does that, they were like, get him out of there, get him out, get the fire department.
That guy definitely got injured. That lion took a bite out of him.
Also, come on, his arms were halfway down his body because they clearly just put like another top on top of him. So like his head was covered by this huge thing that looked like shoulders.
Because he's like, what do you want me to do? Okay, well, we're going to make the top of my body at least the width of this lion's jaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's not taking a chop out of a head.
Come on, didn't you like the sound design though? The sound design, it was just wind. There was wind. That was like a tsunami came in the house at any time. But there were just random screams and laughs. It was like you're on the Haunted Mansion ride in Disney World.
I've heard more convincing noises coming out of my neighbors in my Manhattan apartment.
Right, but it was just random. They would just be like, but they're just like at dinner. Like it's just, I don't know. Also, is the house haunted? Dude. They're like, I don't know. Is the house haunted? They get a Ouija board and literally it's called a planchette. On the Ouija board, it's like the board that you put your hands on to see like where the spelling goes. If you can picture a Ouija board, it just floats through the air. So, yep, it looks like the house is haunted.
Yeah.
They were like, we're going to float as many things as possible.
That's what I'm saying, a horror comedy.
We can afford that effect.
From my perspective, the production value of this and the production value of Magnificent Seven are opposite ends of the scale.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's point out that, like, again, William Castle is not Alfred Hitchcock. And I'm not talking about skill. I'm just talking about the amount of money and, resources at his availability. This is definitely a B horror movie. But I like some of Corman's B horror movies.
Yeah,
I feel like they have a little bit more charm to them. This one, I feel like this one was overreaching. So like, there are elements like things like that. Like how many things can we float? It's like, okay, but like know your role. Like that kitchen scene. After they floated the planchette, I was like, sure, this is 1960, like didn't have a lot of stuff. And then they write in this kitchen scene where one of the ghosts was like an Italian cook that killed his whole fucking family. So they decided to float everything they could off the counters and the milk. And I don't know, it's just like, all right, there's just, I don't know. There was a wiser way, I think, to use the limited resources. It could have been an hour 10 and scarier.
I think the thing that surprised me most about this film was everyone involved in it got more work.
Wait,
except for Charles Herbert.
Can we talk about but here the best part about the film though is that the ghosts are not antagonists of the film. Sometimes ghost movies, they just throw you in a house and then it's a scary ghost, then you're waiting to see if the family's going to die or leave. At least in this, they have a lawyer who's in charge of the estate who's trying to steal the money that's buried in the house. So at least the ghosts aren't the antagonists.
I think the daughter, he's also trying to steal the daughter.
Also,
possibly?
The daughter. So there's like a little boy who's like 9 years old, and then a daughter who is hot, who is very clearly 20 years old and hot. Like she is on dates. Like clearly the producer was like, "I'm casting my girlfriend."
Her name is Medea. The names of these characters is incredible.
And I'm not
Medea,
shaming
Hilda, Cyrus, Van Allen.
Right. I'm not shaming the actress because the actress was awesome, but she clearly won a talent scouting, like in the studios used to do that, and then they were like they need to put her in a picture, so they have like their hot new star that they just throw in movies, and there's no way that she's the sister to this guy. She could I honestly thought, I was like, wait, maybe she is the mother, and I just misread the first scene. Like I really thought she was the kid's mother, not his sister. Like she was way too
was
old.
weird.
It was a very weird age.
Let me correct myself really quickly. I've been wrong this entire time. Charles Herbert is the child.
The child never works again.
Didn't bother me at all. Donald Woods is the father.
Okay.
Cyrus Zorba. He was the one that bothered me a lot. I can't believe.
Well, if you go to
Jeff, to give him credit, I will say I did think that was cool that it ended up that the lawyer searching for money was actually the antagonist, and that I don't know if I needed him to actually be the one who was trying to scare them, but they did have me a little bit on the hook of like, why is this guy so fucking matter of fact about believing in these ghosts and all that shit? I was like, is that just because this movie sucks? So they did get me a little bit. It was like, oh, he was manipulating them the whole time. Well, sort of. Because let's get there and let's talk about the witch.
Okay,
let's talk
about if
her.
you go to Margaret Hamilton's IMDb, that's Margaret Hamilton, number 1 on that list. I'm gonna go ahead and say is the best number 1 you could ever have on your IMDb, which is she is the Wicked Witch from fucking Wizard of Oz. She is the OG Elfie, baby. She is Elfie. She is the Wicked Witch of the West. Dave will tell you a little more about her backstory because he looked it up. He loves Margaret. Dave is a huge number 1 Margaret Hamilton fan. It's why he chose 13 Ghosts.
He's got a giant poster of her in his apartment.
Number 2.
The first thing I see when I wake up in the morning.
Not your wife. Number 2. Number 2 on Margaret Hamilton's IMDb is 13 Ghosts. Somehow 13 Ghosts is number 2 in Margaret Hamilton's after The Wicked Witch of the fucking West. And you sit there and you go, what happened in those 21 years between, I just looked it up on IMDb, at least 50 TV movie, like 50 jobs. But this movie, for some reason, she must have owed a favor, or maybe she was a gambler and lost a card game. And so
she could have get into a nice, respectable porn or something.
A much better porn film out there exists than this. She was called a witch. She is the one she is the lady who worked for the previous owner of the house, the grandfather, and then came with the house, but decided not to tell the family that there's money buried there. She came with the house, and they kept calling her a witch. And then, by the way, I have to spoil it because it's totally worth watching the movie. At the end of the movie, she picks up a broom and stares dead, like down Broadway, right down the lens of the camera.
Down the barrel.
Right down the barrel. She's holding a broom. She might as well wink and fucking fly off that set. It is the...
I thought she did wink. I thought did she not wink? She gave like a
She
smile.
gives like a little nod, yeah.
Witch of the West, playing herself. Things have gone bad for Elfie since she left Oz. That has to be the backstory, right? She's actually playing the Wicked Witch.
Honestly, this whole movie would have been more interesting if it was from her perspective. Like the housekeeper who used to be his medium, who was involved with him, and has this new family coming in. She was my favorite character, honestly.
Well, she was.
I think we can sum this up in you've got the first 5 minutes you're meeting the ghosts in a slow zoom towards camera where they're numbered for you for convenience. And then for the next 55 minutes, you're getting random scenes of ghosts with a loose plot through. And then from the liberal
use of the word plot.
from the 1 hour mark, they introduce the plot of the money being in the house. And then about the 1 hour 15 mark, we're just about there at the end of the film, and like everything's happened, and they suddenly cut to the father sitting there, who proceeds to explain the entire confusing bullshit you've just sat through.
Absolutely terrible. There must have been a scene or two because they
literally
cut right
gives you
to
the
it.
plot points.
They cut right to it, right at that little climax. They cut right to it. It was so weird. I also will say, Margaret Hamilton's character explains to the husband and wife that all the back history. She explains about the money. Like, I didn't trust him until he started pulling out all of his stocks and bonds and turning it into cash. And then he pulled out all of his money out of the banks and hid it here in the house. He knew all of that. There's a scene where the lawyer goes to the husband's office and the husband acts like he doesn't know, but he's not pretending. The character was written incorrectly as though he didn't know there was money in the house. Did you guys catch that? It was like, what?
Yeah,
no, dude, you're totally, you know exactly what he's talking about. You know what the secret the boy is keeping. I don't know. I thought that was a big obvious mistake.
Yeah,
that was like,
there was a lot of obvious mistakes here, like making this movie in the first place.
Come on, just have some fun.
I don't know. It could have been cute. Yeah, I think it could have been cute.
It's not like they paid their actors. Like, it cost nothing.
They didn't pay their actors.
I mean, this is the kind of movie you don't get a royalty check from. You get a fucking apology note.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole time I was watching this, though, I just think,
it's funny. Get the fuck out of here. I don't care.
Jeff, come on, be real with me. You guys, filmmakers here, like, wouldn't there have been a little bit of you that would have had a good time? Like, if we would have moved to Hollywood in the 50s,
100%,
and we were like, these guys are just theater troops that are like, let's try 100%. To make a movie. Like, let's get a little money together and let's get this set and let's just tell this story. Somebody will go watch it, right?
100%.
I don't
It was
know.
fun. All right,
totally
Dave.
would've-
Anything else,
I think I
Dave?
would've had
Anything
fun.
else? I feel like we covered
No,
it.
I think we've exhausted
Go
this pile
If
of
you have a
trash.
Roku, if you have a
long did
Roku,
that
if you have a
take?
Roku device, I think it's fun. Turn it into a drinking game, and every time you see a ghost or they say the word ghost, drink,
Or
and
hear a
let's
moan.
see if you can make it through an hour and 25 minutes. That's what I would say to that.
It's on Crackle as well.
It's on
If anybody has
Crackle, yeah.
Crackle. Yeah. All right.
Cool. So next week, Dave, did you write these down? Because I forget.
Of course I did.
Okay, cool.
Yes, next week we're going to 2018, which
Yeah.
is a short jump. We're going to do the movie Hereditary.
Ah, Tony
And
Collette.
the movie the movie The Favorite.
Olivia Colman, one of my favorite actresses on the planet. Olivia Colman, I really, really hope she's about to win an Emmy tonight for Crown Season 3. She was so good in Crown Season 3. Olivia Colman, The Favorite.
Olivia!
And we're going to try and redeem Solo, a Star Wars story.
We might be able to do it. We might be able to pull it off.
Subject of much derision and controversy, and then developed a little bit of a cult following
Yeah.
in its later days.
Shout out
We may
Mr.
get
Howard.
I mean, we may
saving
get a
the
Solo
day.
2 at some point. I don't know.
Ron Howard, Amelia Clark coming in.
Let's not get ahead of
Okay.
ourselves. Let's see what we
All
can
right.
do.
Guys, this has been a really fun episode talking about films from 1960. Next week, 2018. Can't wait to see you all. Have a fantastic week. Signing out.